And we are back on the Zero Hour. You know, it's been an interesting program, and it reminds me of an adage that political scientists used to use back in the 80s, where they said, the media can't tell you what to think. I'm not sure I agree with that part, but that's how the adage goes. The media can't tell you what to think, but they can tell you what to think about. I think that may be the lesson of the past week. We talked on this program about how journalists feel they're being spied on, probably with good reason, and how that's beginning to inhibit the reporting process. So we have a national security system that in spying upon journalists is beginning to apply a filter to the kind of stories that get reported. We went from there to our coverage of the ISIS situation, what's going on in Iraq, in Syria, in Jordan, and the fact that nobody in our political discourse or in our media coverage of that political discourse or in our media coverage of those wars is talking about the roles that diplomacy and humanitarian aid could play in reducing or ending those conflicts. Again, we're not necessarily being told what to think, but we're being told what to think about. Okay, now, we talked about entertainment. We talked with Jeffrey Boxer about the exploitation of workers in the music industry in order to make Silicon Valley corporations rich. Now, this to me, again, is an example where we talk about whether or not you should pay for your music and who should get royalties. We don't talk about the fact that the music industry is part of a larger trend towards exploiting the middle class, which most music workers, like other workers, are. It's the same trend that's exploiting athletes. It's the same trend that's exploiting drivers for Uber when they lie to them and underpay them and lie to us about how much they're really receiving and so on. It's the same force at work, and we're not being told about it often enough. We talked in the show about the music industry and how entertainment is becoming a manufactured process. We're not talking about that either. We talked about Brian Williams and the Brian Williams controversy, and again, how it's not really. We're being told it's about whether or not Brian Williams lied and what should be done about it, but we're not talking about why Brian Williams lied, why he felt it was important to lie, or what that says about our news business as entertainment and as distraction. Again, Brian Williams was embedded during the Iraq War as opposed to the great reporters of the 60s who went out and found their stories in Vietnam. So let's talk a little bit more about that in the future and a little bit less about Brian Williams, the personality. We talked about the class war being conducted by the Republicans. Again, something that we should all be keeping an eye on. And by the way, we should be holding Democrats' feet to the fire too, because the more conservative Democrats in that party have signed on to this agenda when they should be fighting it. We should not accept that from anyone who claims to represent us in the halls of government. We also talked with Rebecca Vallis about Social Security and how whatever funding problems it may have in the long term, in the 75-year window, are at least partially caused by wealth inequality in this country. So you want to do something about Social Security, Mr. Republican, Ms. Conservative, then address wealth inequality in this country with real proposals, not just lip service. And by the way, you neoliberal Democrats should follow the same rule. You want to express concern about Social Security solvency, do something real about wage inequality. We also talked to Ms. Vallis about poverty and the fact that people aren't talking enough, much less doing enough about poverty in this country. That media political machine, that instrument that tells us not what to think, but what to think about, isn't telling us to think about poverty, and we should be thinking about poverty because it's likely to touch all of us. And we talked with Eileen Applebaum, economist, about paid sick leave and why it's good for the economy, why it's good for most American working people, why it's good for public health. We also talked about how paid sick leave fits into the larger issue of respect, dignity, and decent rights for workers. Again, what are we thinking about? We should be thinking about the fact that there's been a slow degradation and dissolving in this country of the social contract that binds workers and employees, that binds the young and old, that binds the rich and poor, that says we're all in this together. We should be thinking about the fact that that social contract, that web of relationship, that web of trust, that sense of community that has linked us all together is being dissolved as if by acid by the greed and corrosive forces of political corruption, legalized political corruption, known as campaign contributions. It's being corroded by the influence of 6 media corporations, which now dominate the media landscape. It is up to us to change that process, to end that corrosion, to fight to rebuild the web of trust, to fight to rebuild the sense of community, to fight to rebuild the social contract which has made us strong. We will try to do our best. We hope you will join us. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.